Next we will discuss about constructor. So what is constructor and what is the need of constructor? What are the rules we have in constructor? We will discuss about that now. Constructor. So what is constructor first of all in Java? Constructor is nothing but it is a special method which is given in our OOP language, object oriented programming language, for creating and initializing a object. Constructor is a special method which is given in our object oriented programming language for creating and initializing a object. In Java, our constructor role is only initializing the object, and a new keyword role is creating object. This new keyword will create our object, and constructor role is constructor will initialize the object. But in C++, constructor alone creates and initializes object. Now we will see about Java constructor. First I will make a note about this. Constructor is a special method in object oriented programming OOP language for creating and initializing object. In Java, constructor role is only initializing object, and new keyword role is creating object. In C++, constructor alone creates and initializes object. This is about constructor in Java. So we have discussed constructor is used to create and initialize new object. And when you create the new object by using, like, if you want to create new object, how you will create a object for class? Like I will create example object, example e1 is equal to new example. This is how you will create object, right? So this new keyword is for creating object. And this example is our constructor of class. This new keyword and constructor will create and initialize our object. So we will see what are the rules we have in our what are the rules in defining in our constructor? We have some rules. We will discuss about that. Rules in defining constructor. So what are the rules we have in defining constructor? When you create constructor, constructor name should be same as our class name. If you want to create or write a constructor, that name should be same as our class name, and it should not contain a return type. Our constructor should not contain return type because it is not a normal Java method. It is a special method which is given for initializing the object. When it created new object with new keyword, and this constructor is used to initialize that object. It should not contain return type, and this constructor should not contain any modifiers. Modifiers we have discussed already in before lectures. Accessibility modifiers. Constructor should not contain any modifiers, and in constructor, in its logic, return statement with value is also not allowed. I will make a note about all these points. What is the first rule we have? Our first rule in constructor is constructor name should be same as class name. It should not contain a return type. And also it should not contain modifiers. And in its logic, a return statement with value is not allowed. These are the rules we have to follow when we create constructor. How you will create constructor? I will show you. Constructor creation statement. How you can create constructor? Class this is my class. Constructor name should be same as class name. This is my example class constructor. This is how we can create constructor in our Java. This is a constructor. In this constructor, all Java legal statements are allowed except a return statement with value. Next, we will see how our JVM will execute constructor. Class example. This is my example class. This is my example class constructor. I will create main method, public static void main. Inside this main method, string array args. In this constructor, I want to print system.out.println constructor. In this main method, first I want to print system.out.println main. Next I will create this class object example. E1 is equal to new example. So we will see how this class is executed, how my constructor is executed. We will see now. First, whenever our class is executed, output will be first execution starts from main method. Inside main method, I have written system.out.println main. Then main will be printed as my first statement. After that, control comes to example E1 is equal to new example. By seeing this new keyword, it will create a new object in our JVM in heap area. We have discussed about all this. Then it will see constructor, example constructor. By seeing this example constructor, it will execute our example constructor. Inside example constructor, we have constructor in system.out.println constructor. This is how execution process will happen when constructor is executed, when object is created. When you want to call constructor, you have to create object and you have to call that constructor. But if you are calling directly, like example, you're calling my constructor like this. You're calling constructor directly without creating object or without creating any reference variable. You are calling directly constructor. This is a wrong statement. It will show compile time error. You cannot call constructor directly. And one more thing we have to discuss about constructor is when you are creating a class, when you are creating main method, and when execution is done, if you don't write this example class constructor, then our JVM and our compiler will create a constructor automatically. Our compiler will create our example class constructor with zero arg, with no arg constructor. In constructors also we can create, this is without parameters. I have created a example constructor. You can create with parameters also, with some example int a comma int b, and you can pass arguments to our constructor. That we will see in our overloading and overriding concepts. Here this is about constructor explanation. There we will discuss about overloading and overriding, about parameters in constructors. So if you don't write example constructor in class, compiler automatically will write example constructor when you compile your class. And when compiler added this example constructor to your class, it will also add super constructor in your example constructor. Why it will place super constructor in your example constructor? The super constructor is also placed inside example constructor by compiler automatically, because to execute our super class of example class. Example class is a subclass of java.lang.object. We have seen so many examples. All the classes are subclasses of our java.lang.object. It will place super constructor to execute our superclass constructor. Our superclass is java.lang.object, and the java.lang.object constructor will be executed when this constructor is executed. If you have a doubt that compiler will place our example constructor in our example class or not, I will show you practically. I will just create class example05. This is my example05 class. Inside I will create public static void main string array args. Inside this I will just write system.out.println some hello world. I will print hello world. This is for see, this class I am writing just to see whether compiler will create my example class constructor or not. That's the reason I am not writing any logic in this class. We will see compiler will generate constructor for my example class or not. That we will see. Just save it, Ctrl S, example05.java. Now go to command prompt. Open command prompt. In this command prompt, if you want to see whether constructor is executed or not, first you have to compile it. javac example05.java. Sorry, javac example05.java. Now I have successfully compiled my Java class. Now I want to see whether example05 constructor is added in my class or not. We want to see that. For that we have a command called java p example05. So here you can see it is created class example05. Here I have written main method. It is showing main method, but you are observing or not, it is showing me example constructor. My compiler added example constructor automatically to my example 05, but I did not write in my example 05. So you got 100% clarity about constructor now. So what type of constructors we have in our Java, we will see now. Types of constructors. What types of constructors we have in our Java? In Java, Java supports three types of constructors. What are those? We will see now. First one is default constructor. Next one is no arg constructor or no parameterized constructor. And also we have parameterized constructor. So default constructor we have seen, this is our default constructor. No arg constructor and no parameters constructor is nothing but constructor which is having, like I will create a constructor. So this is a constructor. In this we don't have any parameters and arguments. This constructor is no arg constructor. And what is parameterized constructor? Parameterized constructor is nothing but example int a. This is a parameterized constructor with int a. So if you are executing this example parameterized constructor, how you will execute? If you want to execute that, you have to write example e1 is equal to new example. This is my constructor. I have created constructor. Then you have to send some int value like some 10. Then your parameterized constructor will be executed. This is how you can work with parameterized constructor. The compiler generated constructor is called default constructor. We have seen, and no parameters constructor is nothing but a constructor which is having no parameters. And parameterized constructor is nothing but this is a parameterized constructor which is having int value, and I am sending 10 as argument to this constructor. All these comes under types of constructors. Next we will discuss about non-static block. Next we will discuss about non-static block. So what is non-static block? What is the use of non-static block? We will discuss now. A class level block which doesn't have any prototype. Prototype is nothing but a head. A class level block which is not having any prototype is called a non-static block. I will show you how to create a non-static block. So what is the need of this non-static block? We should define this non-static block to execute some logic only at the time of object creation. It will execute when you create a object. It will not see whether it is a no-arg constructor or parameterized constructor or non-parameterized constructor. It will not see which constructor you use. It will just see whether object is created or not. If object is created, then it will execute constructor. Sorry, it will execute non-static block. First I will make a note about this, then we will see example. A class level block which doesn't have prototype. Prototype is nothing but a head, is called non-static block. So we will see how to create a non-static block inside a class. Some class example. Inside this class I will create a non-static block. We have discussed a class level block which doesn't have any prototype is called non-static block, means just brackets. This is our non-static block, because non-static block will not be having any prototype in its creation. This is our class. This is our non-static block. So what is the need of this non-static block? This non-static block will execute whenever you create an object. For example, you are creating some example e1 is equal to new example. You are creating a new object. That means whenever you are creating an object, before executing that object, this non-static block will be executed. For every object you create in your class, it will execute non-static block before the execution of object. We will see programmatically. First, I will make a note about this. Need of non-static block. We should define non-static block to execute some logic only at the time of object creation. We should define non-static block to execute some logic only at the time of object creation, irrespective of the constructor used in object creation. whatever the constructor you are using, whether it is parameterized or non-parameterized, whenever you are creating object, this non-static block will be executed before creating object. We will see programmatically. Just go to Notepad. We will create a class. Just don't mind that I'm not using Eclipse, I'm using Notepad. So I'm using Notepad because when we are learning something, like I will just tell you an example. Before learning bike, first you have to know how to learn cycle, right? Then if you know how to ride a bicycle or cycle, then you can easily manage how to drive bike. Means with that example I am involving in this. Before using Eclipse, before learning advanced topics, I will let you learn all the basics from very basic level. If you practice in Notepad all this, you will get 100% clarity about our Java programming. That's the reason I am using Notepad. If I use Notepad, then you will be having good clarity. Then you also, it's just my suggestion. If you want to use Eclipse, you can use it. Class example. In this example class, I will create a non-static block. This is my non-static block. Here I will use two constructors. This is my non-parameterized constructor. First, in this non-static block, I want to print system.out.println. This is non-static block. And inside this constructor, which is non-parameterized, I want to print system.out.println. In this I want to print no arg constructor. Next I want to create parameterized constructor. Example. Inside this constructor, I will use string. I want to print system.out.println. String arg constructor, or we can call it as parameterized constructor. So I'm creating a non-parameterized constructor and I'm creating a parameterized constructor with string value, and I have created non-static block. Now I will create main method. Public static void main string array args. Inside this main method, system.out.println, I want to print main. Inside this, I will create example objects with two constructor, with non-parameterized constructor and with parameterized constructor. Example e2 is equal to new example. This is non-parameterized constructor. Now I will create an object with parameterized constructor. Example e2, example e3 is equal to new example. This is my parameterized constructor. That's the reason I have to pass string value ABC, because here I am using string parameterized constructor. So already I am having example class. That's the reason I want to name this class as example 07. constructor also should be same as constructor name should be same as class name 07. So what happens when I execute this class? First control comes to my main method. When JVM is executing from main method, first it will print system.out.println main. First it will print main on my console. Then it will come to next line. Then it will see example object is created with no parameterized constructor. Then it will execute my no parameterized constructor. Before executing this no parameterized constructor, it will see that non-static block is having in our class. Then before creating object for this class, before creating this E2 object reference, my non-static block will be executed. After executing this non-static block statement, then control comes to example 07 E2 is equal to new example. Then it will create object for our example class. Then my no or no parameterized constructor will be executed. This will be executed after my non-static block. Then control comes down. It will see again another object is created with parameterized constructor. But before creating object for this parameterized constructor, it will check whether we have non-static block or not. We have non-static block in our class. Then it will execute non-static block. Before object creation, it will execute non-static block. After executing this non-static block, again it comes to object creation statement. Example E7 E3 is equal to new example with parameterized constructor. Then it will then JVM will create object for this E3 reference. It will execute example with string parameter because we are passing string value. We have string parameterized constructor which is example 7. Then this string R constructor will be executed. So at last we understood that whenever we are creating an object, either it is parameterized or non-parameterized, or either it is parameterized or non-parameterized. Before creating object, for every object non-static block will be executed. We will execute this class. Just save it. Example 07.java. Go to command prompt JAVSE example 07.java. So it has successfully compiled our class. Now we will execute that class Java example 07. Now you can clearly see here, first my main statement is executed. Control came to my main method. Execution started. Main is executed. Then it has executed. After main execution, it has executed NSB non-static block. After this main statement, control went to non-static block execution. After executing this non-static block execution, then no R constructor is executed. After executing this non-static block, then it has created object for our example class. This example non-parameterized constructor is executed. That's the reason it is showing no R constructor. And next, it has created non-static block. It executed non-static block again. You are observing or not? It has executed non-static block 2 times because we are creating 2 objects of example class. For every object creation, non-static block will be executed before object creation. Before creating object only, it will execute non-static block. After executing non-static block, it has created object for our example class with parameterized constructor with string value. That's the reason this string R constructor is executed on our console. This is non-static blocks in our Java.